welcome to the show. I know that in the intro it said that it's the 19th and Secularity's on with me, and that is not true. That is a lie. Thank you so much for joining me. And oh my goodness, technical difficulties. Of course it's going to happen. The best way that I could make sure that this show could happen is if I reloaded an old version of the episode. So I will change it in post. If you're watching this later, especially for like a Patreon version, that will be fixed. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm just going to dive right into it. I'm so excited to have my friend on, Drew, Genetically Modified Skeptic. How's it going, brother?
Hey, it's going great. And I didn't mind the intro. You kept the clip where we kiss in it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love you too. Love you too.
This is how Gen Z does it now, I think.
Yeah?
This is how we do it. Yeah.
Okay. This is how we do it.
Yeah, well, I'm a zillennial, I guess. I'm like the oldest of Gen Z, the youngest of the millennials. So I'll do the K-pop way.
Dude, I'm so glad that you're here. You have been like crazy busy, and I know that we hang out and we see each other pretty often off air, but like now you're on my channel. It's been what, like a year?
Yeah, it's been a while. I still remember giving a very long rant about the canonization of the New Testament and how both atheists and Christians believe about equal amounts of misinformation about it.
I don't even think I remember that.
If you started playing the clip, you'd be like, oh yeah, God, here we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to have you on today because you have been kind of standing up to authority lately, and especially uncomfortable authority figures in the atheist space, but you're not new to that. And I feel like it's the week after Trump was elected, and it feels especially important to be able to talk about standing up against authority figures. So, do you want me to give you more of a lead-in, or are you comfortable with talking about any part of what you've been up to?
Yeah, I can get going. I mean, it's really where to start. Should I start with the Dawkins stuff?
I think so. I think you absolutely should.
Okay, yeah. So the context here is that last year I was invited to work with Richard Dawkins. Basically, I was to interview him, and if I interviewed him on my channel, then I stood a very good chance of being able to actually co-host a tour stop in Texas with Dawkins on his farewell tour. So, big career opportunity for me and for pretty much everybody, except for Steven Pinker and Michael Shermer, maybe, that ended up hosting.
Yeah.
I did not do that because Richard Dawkins, as a biologist, naturally, he primarily talks about why, I don't know, like gender ideology is bad. And it's bad for all of these social reasons, and that's why it's against science. He always positions it as, oh, well, I'm a biologist and I'm the expert, and I can tell you that something that's actually outside of the considerations of a biologist like me is bad scientifically. There's a huge shell game that goes on between like gender and sex in these circles, in the gender critical circles, right?
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it blows my mind. I mean, when I first interacted with, Dawkins books before I got involved in the atheist space, I read, what was it? The Blind Watchmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And that was great. It was about evolutionary biology, right? How you could get from, just a light sensitive cell and how that could be beneficial to an organism, to the complexity of the eye, and every step along the way, how that's not accidental, and how arguments against, the complexity, arguments for complexity don't really follow. And that felt really, really well done. And the fact that he's been dragged into issues that are completely outside of his space blows my mind. And it especially, it kills me that, yeah, he's been more doing the gender critical stuff than the skepticism atheist stuff, uh, it
Yeah.
seems, for a while.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm so surprised that he would do that. You know, he's just known for his science stuff." But if you've been in the skeptic community since, Elevator Gate, if you've been around watching people like Rebecca Watson, who I really like and respect, you realize that Richard Dawkins has positioned himself as like an anti-social justice pundit for well over a decade now.
Yeah.
I mean, when women started coming into the skeptic space, because I mean they always have been skeptics and have always been influential. They just have been behind the scenes because men haven't let them, share the limelight with them. But when women started to get platforms, started to actually be more public facing in the skeptic and atheist communities, uh, conversation started. People like Rebecca Watson started saying, "Oh, men in these spaces often make women very uncomfortable, and if we actually want women to be in these spaces, which you guys are, at least saying you do,
Hmm.
then men are going to have to change their behaviors so that women aren't constantly preyed upon or creeped out or just made to feel unwelcome at the very least."
Yeah.
And Richard Dawkins' response to that was to write
Well,
something that is now known as the Dear Muslima letter, where he basically was like, these white feminists like Rebecca Watson don't care about female genital mutilation because they're complaining about being creeped out at atheist conferences. And
so
so
I
his bigotry goes back a long way, and
yeah.
we're just seeing the newest manifestation of that.
No, that makes sense, and I do want to clarify that Dawkins wasn't the one who was being accused of being a creep. I think at the time wasn't it Pinker?
I mean, so this is a wider conversation about men generally in the
But the
in this space. But
oh,
in reference to the Dear Muslima thing, I think that actually had more to do with uh, Elevator Gate, with discussions of just what happened, things that happen between people at conferences, not between like, not like about Steven Pinker or something like this. Not that
okay.
I'm aware of.
I think that I've actually talked to a couple people who were like right at the middle center of that much later on. And there definitely were like particular individuals, but Dawkins wasn't one of those particular individuals, but standing up for and against changing a system that has worked really well for him, you know, makes
Yeah.
sense. And yeah, I okay, so I think we talked about who Dawkins is. We talked about what his um, what his priority has been over the last 10 years. It's really been moving more and more towards becoming a pundit, like you said, having turfs on his podcast and talking about gender ideology and all of that. And so calling him out for that makes sense. And when people say, oh, why are you bringing this up? Well, no, you're not. You're just responding to what the fuck he's doing. So you were
Yeah.
offered this position, right, to interview him when he came through on his book tour. That would have dramatically increased the amount of eyeballs on you and your show. And so you said no.
Yeah.
And then you made a video about it.
Yeah, I did make a video about it, and it's funny, when people say just a lot of the responses to this. It's really telling what the import for a lot of people uh, Dawkins content really has at this point. People just saying, "Well, Dawkins is the biologist, so I'm going to trust him on the subject of biology," when no, he's talking about things like autogynephilia, which is
That's
basically based on a bunch of pseudoscience from the 80s and early 90s from Ray Blanchard, which doesn't have anything to do with biology. Is like a pseudoscientific psychological theory. Personality theory is really more relevant to this. He's talking about the way that people like Riley Gaines are being systematically discriminated against, and that trans people actually have the dominant voice in politics in the United States. Like, these are the types of things he's saying. And then his audience goes, "Why are you arguing with a biologist about biology?" Like, I'm not arguing with a biologist about biology. I'm arguing with a biologist about something that I actually have more education in than he does.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
you have your degree
yeah,
in psychology, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like that's not to say like, oh, I'm some kind of expert, because I'm not. It's just that like when there is relevant, when there's, I'm able to recognize the relevant scientific category and do the reading of like current literature on that, which is more than I can say for Dawkins, because he never cites any type of source whatsoever when he talks about these subjects. It's purely rhetorical. It's, making claims with no basis whatsoever or appealing to his own authority. And so that was kind of the primary pushback that I got
Yeah.
against the video, unfortunately.
Well, that, and also you pointed out how, and I don't want to swoop, like people who want to see more of this, so I should absolutely watch your video. But you also pointed out the company that he keeps, the people who have, glommed onto him since that's become his main talking point,
Yeah.
are pretty fucking problematic. And that's definitely a
Yeah.
group that I understand you would not want to be a part of. So I feel like there are other authorities you've stood up to that don't have the same impact as this, right? You really, really tore apart. Wasn't it doTERRA?
Young Living.
Young
But I mean,
Living.
yes, I have talked shit about doTERRA too, but Young Living
Young Living.
primarily.
Right. So Young Living essential oils, you really tore into how it is culty as fuck, how it preys on this kind of Christian, atmosphere, and it pulls people into this really, really weird pseudo Christian, worldview, and they don't like you. Right? Like
Yeah,
you
yeah,
got you got, pretty torn up by them, but they were not in the community that you're also a part of. Your family's in the, I think, or at least people you know are,
yeah,
but you're not.
yeah,
You're in the atheist community, at least to a degree, right? You're connected to this space. And I feel like it's really important for people to understand that standing up to authority is really fucking easy when you're not part of that community that is impacted by it.
yeah,
When you are part of the community that is impacted by it, you feel that's effect. You feel its effects. And I feel like it is incredibly important for people to realize that it matters most when it hurts. It matters
yeah,
most when you have something to lose. You've got skin in the game, because where you are, where you're making your friends, and for content creators like us, the community that's consuming your content, you run the risk of losing a bunch of fans. You run the risk of having people not want to work with you. You run the risk of, getting absolutely slammed from both Dawkins and anyone else who has a problem with the content that you've been doing. But you've been strong on your ideals. You've been standing up for what you feel is right. And the conversations around trans issues have become a point that you've continually gone back to in multiple videos recently, calling out Christian pastors and just really bad arguments and pseudo psychology around trans issues. And I thank you.
yeah. I mean, okay, so here's the thing. One of the things that I called out in that Dawkins video is that, hey, Dawkins is primarily associating with people who are like anti-vaxxers, evangelical Christians, ancient aliens proponents, and white supremacists and white supremacy advocates, and like eugenics science people. All these people who platform and propagate primarily just like absolute garbage misinformation that Dawkins has said that he's against like his entire career,
Mhm.
right? Like, we've often been inspired by Dawkins and his resolute stand against misinformation and pseudoscience. Well, now he almost exclusively runs with people who promote this kind of stuff. So I made the point in the video many times, even if you don't want to, for some reason, and I say this because I know that there are people watching the video who wouldn't want to because they like him. Um, Even if you don't want to call him a bigot and then like criticize him because he's being bigoted, you can criticize him and dismiss his credibility at this point, because all he does is work with and promote, pseudoscientists. Like that's what this is. And of course it is, completely valid to say that he is extremely bigoted and should be written off for that too. But it really works on either level, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
But both are good reasons to take the stand that you're taking. Like, yeah. Sorry, we have our first caller coming in, and I honestly forgot. We're 20 minutes into the show already.
Oh,
We're 20 minutes in, and I forgot to put the phone number out there. So this is a call-in show. If you want to talk to Drew or I about the topic, or about what you believe and why, or any of the various reasons you'd want to call in, today's the day. We have one caller in the queue, and we've got a call screener and plenty of open lines, and we'd love to talk to you. So here is the phone number. If you want to call on your phone, it's 412-SKEPGEN. That's 412-753-7436. Or you can go to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. Our call screener is waiting to talk to you, and we would love to have you. It's more than just Drew and I talking about this. It's interacting with you and where you are. Drew, do you want to talk to our first caller? Are you ready?
yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
All right. We're going to talk to Keena in Washington. Keena, you're live.
Hello.
Hi. Okay, so you called in at the end of the last episode, and you had this whole topic, and I asked you to call back because there just wasn't time for it. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, and that's what I'm calling back now.
Love it. Love it. Okay. What did you want to talk about?
So about a month ago, I switched from agnostic atheist to agnostic atheist. And I want to make the case that it's even more intellectually sound than agnostic atheist already is.
All right. And what is an agnostic atheist?
So it's similar to non-cognitivism, if you've heard of that.
Yeah, it's impossible to know.
Sort of. It's more like a moo situation. Like the question is wrong. Like basically, at least in my case, what I figured out was when I sorry, I mean that moment when you imagine the conversation in your head and then it goes a different way. Oh, mu as in mu. It's a Buddhist thing, I think. No, anyways, so basically in my case, what agnosticism means is that I tried to come up with a way, like if we just assume that I have perfect knowledge, right? How would I define the difference between a sufficiently advanced alien and a god? And like I stopped to think about it, it's like if like I don't think there is one. Like if because like
so I hear you.
Mm-hmm.
And how does that apply to saying you're agnostic? Like, why does that matter?
Because I think it's a bad framing of the situation, right? Like, if Captain Kirk beams down from the Enterprise, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would probably be better to treat him as a sufficiently advanced alien, or at least, obviously in this case,
to the locals, he is.
From the future. Yeah, but like only conditionally, like only in this specific situation. I don't think it's really helpful in the long run to think of him as a god.
Okay, Drew, unless you want to jump in here, I'm going to go full Star Trek on this.
I mean, I was just going to say, as I understand, atheism is just saying that the terms of the terms involved cannot be or are not defined well enough for one to actually be able to have, a strong opinion, to be able to answer the question. And I mean, if people want to use that term for themselves, I'm like, cool, yeah, that's fine. And it's actually something that I agree with. Although I'm not often having conversations with people who care enough about my label of my specific version of non-theism that I find it particularly useful for myself. I tend to prefer talking about other things at this point,
I might also just be using the wrong word. It's one of those things, like I figured it out for myself and then I went Googling to figure out what words, because like, okay, I'm not the first one to think of this. I'm never the first one to think of this. Like, what's the me.
Yeah. Yeah, and this term was invented by actually a humanist rabbi, Sherwin Wine, I believe his name was. And yeah, back in the 60s. So this has actually been around for a good while. It's almost surprising that it's not more popular than it is, given that it's long, long, long predated, the Dawkins scale, for instance, which I think is a lot more popular.
So I kind of want to challenge the idea of ichtheism then. If y'all have represented this well, then that sounds great until you're talking to somebody who has a definition for God. Because if they have a definition, then saying to them that there's no clear definition feels like it's skipping the part where you find out what their definition is. And if somebody clearly defines that God to you and then wants to talk to you about that, wouldn't ichtheism then no longer be an applicable response?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about it in terms of like a book club, but if we're talking about in terms of like a real thing that exists, then it's, you can't just define a thing into existence. It's got to actually map to something in reality.
Well, not really, no. There are a lot of things that I define into existence that don't have one-to-one correlates in reality. All concepts, justice, mercy, kindness, all of those exist and are defined by us and don't have correlates in reality.
No, they definitely map to reality. I mean, it's not a one-to-one mapping, but it is. I mean, I don't think anything's really a one-to-one mapping anyway.
Okay, so then if that's the case, if somebody says that they define God as the God described in the Bible, then there's plenty there to work with, right? And if they say that they have even more, detailed, more nuanced information that they believe about their God, maybe their God is omnipotent or omnipresent or, or just that which created the universe, like all of those are ways that somebody could define a God. And if they defined it that way, then would you still say that it's too fuzzy to be defined?
I mean, I guess, but like it does. I mean, I at least for me personally, I don't think that it's a useful definition. Like basically, we're at that point, God is a role, right? It's not like a type of thing. It's just this is how this being relates to me, which I guess kind of makes sense. But then it, like, you're like a celebrity could be a god, a literal god at that point, and that just seems like a useless word.
Well, but that's if they define celebrity as God. Somebody says that they define, whatever created the universe as God, then that's not a celebrity. That is a specific claim that's being made, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But like, it's not a. Okay.
So if that's the case, and I'm pushing back just because I want to see how fleshed out this is. I don't have necessarily a strong opinion, but I want to test it here. So if somebody
I can take it back to the whole like alien thing. I mean, imagine that someone. I think a defense of this is imagine someone says, okay, yes, my specific definition of God is this. They are the God of the specific interpretive framework of the Bible. This is how they relate to me. This is how powerful they are. This is what they do. This is where they live. All of these things. At that point, does that eliminate the question that you can then ask? Well, how can I tell that apart from sufficiently advanced or powerful or omnipotent material being rather than like ethereal or supernaturalist being? Does that sound about right to you, caller?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
So
basically just. I think most people would try to say that God is like a category of being, not a role, and that's basically what I'm taking issue with. Like, I don't think their definition makes sense with reality, even if it makes sense to them personally.
Yeah, I mean, if something is, advanced enough to where we are limited in our ability to investigate it, then can we actually draw a conclusion that that thing should be considered as belonging to that category of being if we're not really capable of investigating it in the first place? And so, ichtheism might be saying, well, if something's, advanced enough to where we can investigate it thoroughly, then can we really draw a conclusion on whether or not it does belong to that category of being? I mean, that's the way that I view like what atheism kind of
Okay. So can I?
says.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and
Then
that's kind of what I'm gonna get.
okay. Then
Yeah.
let me challenge you both on this. Right. In Lord of the Rings, people will, say to the elves, "Oh, you have this magic, that you imbue into weapons, right? And that gives them these special abilities. Oh, you make mithril, which is this, legendary material. They treat them as people who weave magic, but to the elves in Lord of the Rings, their response is, that's just technology. They just know how to do
Mhm.
it. You don't know, but they know. It's not magic to the elves, but it is to everyone else, right? And if that's the case, then I would say that to everybody who's not an elf, that them calling it magic makes sense. In Star Trek, what is a Q but a god? It is a sufficiently advanced alien who, for all intents and purposes, meets the criteria for godhood. So if God was an alien, that doesn't make it not God. It would just make it an alien. Just because it's indistinguishable or, doesn't disinclude it. It just makes it a potential solution, right?
Sure, but it's an unfalsifiable conclusion. Like anything that you could call a god, you can only call a god because you don't know how it works. So
Hmm.
you would never actually know if it's a real god. That's why, like if like
Well,
maybe if you had like perfect knowledge of everything that ever existed, you could say, okay, this is definitely just a god here. It doesn't have any rules. It just does what it wants, right?
I
But
mean,
without perfect knowledge,
so are you saying that perfect knowledge is the only way that someone can genuinely enter into the God discussion?
yeah, basically, because if like basically what you're saying is a god is something that we have a gap in our knowledge to explain. So the only way that you could ever definitively prove that yes, this is a god, is if there is nothing you do not know.
I don't believe that. I think that
No.
waffles exist, but I don't know everything about waffles. I don't need to have perfect knowledge about how my shirt was made to say that it exists and that I use it. I certainly don't know how my cell phone works, but I don't need perfect knowledge about it to make any statements about it. So why does
I
that
mean,
differ?
Sure, but
I'll throw my perspective in
Yeah.
here. I'm hearing just two categories of thinking about what a god is. Eric is defining a god as something that, or is at least saying that a god can be defined through a matter of perspective because it fulfills a specific role to a specific person. And I'm hearing that. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Is it Kina?
it's Tina.
Kina. Okay. And then what I'm hearing Kina say is, okay, but I'm wanting to discuss godhood as a matter of ontology, as a matter of being that is completely separate from anyone's given perspective. God as a specific type of being that exists in reality, regardless of anyone's perspective. If no one was around to worship it, it would still be a god. Whereas I think Eric is saying, like, anything can be made a god as long as someone assigns it that. As long as something assigns it godhood. So I kind of see like you know, a conversation from these two different perspectives, just like going past
Just
each other.
moving right back. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So let me think about that.
Yeah,
Are are
yeah. I mean, I just think.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, there's a bit of a delay. I'd rather hear you. What's up?
Okay. Yeah, it's just for me. I think it's more useful to try to map it onto reality rather than perspective because, well, in no small part because, like, if you talk to a Christian and you ask them, if you did not exist, would God still be God? I bet you they're going to say, well, yeah, of course. So, like, they
I think that's a
think
good
they're
point.
talking about a thing that exists in reality.
Sure. And how do you talk about things that exist in reality, but to describe them, understand, try to understand what its qualities are, deconstruct it a bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think when you deconstruct it, it stops. Like, well, I mean, it's like magic, right? Like, as you said, like, when you understand how the magic works, it's not magic anymore. It's just a weird technology. And so I think if you understood how a god worked, it wouldn't be a god anymore. It would just be a sufficiently advanced alien, even if that sufficiently advanced alien originates from some point outside of our universe.
I mean, I would it would be a god though if it had the qualities that were being ascribed to it. It sounds like you have a definition for a god, and you're taking that definition and putting it on other people. That god needs to be something that is extra dimensional, and it cannot be an alien, because if it was, it wouldn't be a god. And it cannot be a technology that can never be understood, because if it did, then it wouldn't be a god. But are you prepared to have conversations with people who disagree with you on those things? Because they can. I mean, I'm taking the position here that a god could be an alien. Sure, why not?
Okay, I mean, I guess so. Like, I have a Protestant Christian background, so from the most of the theists I've interacted with, like, they would definitely say, like, no, God can't be an alien because God's a god, right? That's a different sort of thing. I guess I didn't consider, like, there probably are other religions where, like, those two things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. That does make sense.
Yeah, I'm thinking about William Lane Craig's version of the Kalam cosmological. I know Drew's like, oh God, no. But like, we did have a couple really good callers. We had one, and I think there might just be an issue with Call-in Studio, but we have people dropping out. Keena, before we continue, I do want to make sure I put the phone number out there because I want to have other conversations with other people too. So really quickly, 412-SKEPGEN, that's 412-753-7436, or you can go to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. Our call screener is waiting to take your call, and we would love to talk to you. That said, Keena, sorry. I think that like the William Lane Craig version of the Kalam says that God necessarily has to be from outside of this universe. And if you are not from this planet, you're already an alien. So
True.
I would say that it's probably not unpopular that whatever God was, God is not an earthling. Especially if God created the earth. If that was true, then God would not be from Earth. So there you go. I don't know. I guess I'm just bringing it up because I want to help flesh out where you're coming from and kind of flesh out that idea. And if igtheism, if the way that you're defining it is that the definitions are too unclear, then it sounds like it's unclear because you're applying your definition and your definition is unclear. And then instead of responding to what other people are saying, it sounds like you're trying to replace that with your unclear definition. So atheism can still be a good position.
I guess so. I mean, it is definitely possible that, like, it would not surprise me if you understood the position I am stating better than I do.
I don't.
How much more experience you have?
I don't. I probably do if I refreshed myself on it. That's the beauty of a call-in show, is you do your best. You never know what's coming next. We have a caller in India who's been trying to call in, who has an entirely other perspective. And so, yeah, you just never know what's going to come in. That said, I do have the ability to listen and actively kind of engage with people where they are. And if that's your definition, then I'm responding to that, specifically you and what you're saying. And yeah, I don't think that holds up. Does that mean that I wouldn't be in community with you? Hell no. I'd love to be in community with you. Let's not draw like party lines, but at the same time, I don't think that's a super strong position. And I wouldn't be able to defend it necessarily.
Okay. I mean, I guess I'll just have to think over it some more then, because like I'm probably have to re-listen to the call, because in the moment I'm not seeing the problems as clearly as you seem to be. So yeah.
How about I do the same on my end, and we'll talk again about it.
Okay.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. I know that's not your usual, Drew.
It used to be that it's so funny. People email me all the time being like, oh, will you please take on this argument for God? And what do you think about free will and all this kind of stuff? And I'm like, I like to talk about things that we can understand from a study of history. And I don't know. I'm a little bit less on the philosophy of religion stuff and more on the sociology of religion stuff these days.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, people change, and they're like, people have asked me why I keep having the same conversation over and over and over again for years, and it's true. My interests change. I want to talk about other things, but I feel personally like there are so many new people in the space consistently that while this might be the 5,000th time I've had this conversation, it's the first time somebody else has had theirs, and I don't know. I guess I'm in a unique position to be able to have the same conversation so many times that I can sharpen it and get really good at it. But the fact that there's turnover and people want to move on to other things, I fully expect. Yeah, absolutely. So our caller in India called back, and I'm really interested. It's a multi-part question. And I'd love to take the call. We also have more open lines too. So 412-SKEPGEN, that's 412-753-7436, or you can go to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. That's tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. It looks like there are people in the chat who are disagreeing with me. I would love for them to call in and tell me why. That said, let's talk to Dhruv in India. Dhruv, you're live on the show. Hello. Did I say your name correctly?
You pronounce it very right, very correctly.
Yay! All right. So, Dhruv, it looks like there are multiple pieces, so I'm going to try and help break this apart. It says, part 1, how atheists can help to end suffering. What does that mean? What's going
on? In the world we live today, in the childhood, we never realize, right? We just grow up, we just play around, we are not into relationship, we don't have any responsibility, and life goes on. We live in the moment. We don't think about the past, we don't think about the future, and at certain stage, when we get into real life.
Hello? Dhruv?
I'll drop.
It's not saying that the call is dropped yet. It's showing that the call is still going. Oh, Dhruv, are you there?
I'm not. Yes, I'm there.
Oh, good. Okay. So you were saying, I want you to finish your thought, but it cut out when you said, we don't think about the past, we don't think about the future.
Okay. So I was talking about childhood, right? We were living in the moment to moment. So there was, the life was very in a flow. It was movement, it was in flow, so there was not much worries. However, once we get into adulthood, once we get into relationship, I think the relationship is the toughest thing, right? And then we start to suffer, right? So in the religion which I'm from Hinduism, so I'm agnostic. I'm not very sure about that God and all.
Sure.
But somehow the Hinduism had an answer, right? They were like, hold on to it. things will get on its own. Things will get settled. You will grow up. You will be matured. But it's been very.
Oh, you cut out again. Dhruv, I want to answer some of the things that you said in the meantime, though, while you come back. There was a bit of a disconnect, and I hope that you're still here. But I do want to respond to a little bit of that. So just to recap, I believe Dhruv was saying in childhood, you're living moment to moment and you are not really thinking about before and after. You're just kind of being there in that space. And as an adult in relationships, things start to change. And in Dhruv's kind of agnosticism around the faith that he was raised in, people said that eventually he'll mature and learn and stay in the faith. Does that sound about right, Dhruv?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. How incredibly condescending. For somebody to say, oh, eventually you'll be old and wise and smart enough to know that I'm right and you're wrong. That's absolute
Yeah.
bullshit. And Dhruv, I hope that you can hear me because they should not be pulling that shit. All that does is give them a reason to stop thinking about it and make themselves feel better than you because they can't talk to you about what the actual issue is. Because if they could, they would talk to you about that instead. So
Right.
if they're choosing to condescend, all they're doing is telling you that they are too weak to have the conversation and they are not worth having the conversation with. Dhruv, are you there? That said, I am going to keep Dhruv on the line because I want to read the question. There are several parts, and I don't think we're going to get to material and immaterial, but Dhruv wanted to ask about how atheists can help to end suffering. And that is a piece that I'd love to talk about. Dhruv, I don't want to like walk all over you here. But would you agree with me that, if we see problems in the world, that it's human hands that solve human problems? We can't expect things to just magically get better over time.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say that one of the first steps to coming out of religion and realizing that human hands can solve human problems is realizing that all of the religions that have been created by people, usually to try to solve some sort of human problem. So human hands attempting to solve human problems. And if you think that there's good that's been done by religions, you can now realize, oh, that's good stuff that's been done by, just human beings. And religion is a tool, is a technology they created in order to do good stuff. So
Hopefully.
clearly our ability is not hindered to do good stuff upon the realization that religions were created by people too.
Yeah. And I do want to be clear, though, that when you're talking about atheism, you're talking about the statement that or the rejection of God claims. That's not going to make the world better. Not really.
Yeah.
Fighting against, Christian nationalism, dominionism, or religious overreach into the public sphere, that is important. Pushing back against, dogmas that separate families from each other and encourage shunning and things like that. That's incredibly important. But you don't need to be an atheist to do that. You just need to have some fucking empathy. But atheists, just like Christians, do not have a stranglehold on kindness and charity. And I think atheism is a tool. Specifically, skepticism is a tool. And skepticism doesn't really have anything to do with making the world better. It just has to do with a good way of asking questions. So it's looking for a screwdriver and it's a hammer. It's not useful necessarily in ending suffering.
Right. Yeah. In order to end suffering as an atheist, you gotta, I don't know, you don't point your atheism at it. You point something else.
Yeah. Yeah. You get out there and help other people. And even then it's not going to end suffering. But reducing it is good enough. That said, Drew, I've kept the line open, but it sounds like there's been a break. So I hope that at some point you can find a better connection or whatever the issue is, and we can pick this conversation up on another day. But thank you for calling in. That breaks.
I like that his name sounds like my name. It's just the Indian version of my name. I like that.
Fair enough. Okay. Oh, we've got our first call specifically for you, Drew.
Oh, great. Okay. Fun.
Jacob in Tennessee. Hold on just a second before we get way into it. I want to get you in the lower third. And I got to type it in. How's it going?
Quick. Pretty good. Like I said, I've been following both of you guys for a while, so I remember you back from the old ACA days. Days.
Nice. Well, thank you so much. Yeah. I'm going to read what it says in the call notes. It says, how much do the hosts agree with Dawkins, and wouldn't it be beneficial to talk about what you agree on?
Yeah. So I don't know if you've ever heard it.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's all right. You should lay out your idea before I weigh in. I don't necessarily know what you're getting at. Right off the bat.
Okay. I don't know if you've ever heard of Daryl Davis. He's got a really famous TED Talk where he talks about converting Ku Klux Klan members. He's a black man, and he was like, and he had this thought, these people hate me, they don't know me, I'm gonna go talk to them. And so he went and he would strike up conversations with them, and over the course of years and years and years, he has multiple people that have turned over their Ku Klux Klan robes to him and left that because of he was able to get close to them and discuss these things with them and get them to realize that I'm not what they say I am, essentially, right? And so I can see kind of a version like this with you and Dawkins, where if you choose to go on a show with Dawkins, you have an in with him, you can potentially, for lack of a better word, tug on his heartstrings or make good arguments, et cetera, and, do more good than harm, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I appreciate you, bringing that to me, and it's a good faith question, and I'm glad that you also brought up it's Daryl Davis, right? Is his name, the guy who basically deconverted KKK members?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah. So let's look at. I mean, he does have a really moving story, and it's something I have learned things from, and it's something I actually have tried to emulate before in my career. Let's look at how Daryl Davis did this. So when he was, courting a prospective KKK member to try to put a pebble in their shoe, to try to get them to doubt, what was his approach? Did he go to them publicly? Did he ask them to publicly debate with him and defend their KKK positions? Or did he speak to them not even primarily, but exclusively behind the scenes where they might have felt more safe and open?
I think he used everything he could. I don't know if there are any formal debates per se, but I know he would go to KKK rallies, and he would go to where they congregate, and then that was his main method, was going to where they congregate and just kind of talking to people on the sidelines who weren't talking to anyone, and then he would drag that out. He would maybe invite them over for dinner or invite them to his church or something. So it was mainly like a personal type of approach.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's usually pretty effective, or at least the more effective way of doing it. That's something that I've done specifically on trans topics with people behind the scenes, whether it's, other content creators, whether it's family members, whether it's just friends of mine. I've done that, quite a few times, and actually surrounding the Dawkins stuff. I had people in my life that disagreed with me on doing what I did when it came to turning down Dawkins. And I spoke to them privately about it and, maybe persuaded them to a certain degree, maybe not. But that is something that I am actually actively engaged in. It's just not something that you necessarily would ever know, because I don't go around filming all the conversations that I have with the loved ones in my life, or, peers or colleagues or whatever. a big difference I see between that and what I had the opportunity to do with Dawkins is that while I've actually shared mutual friends with Dawkins in real life, we're not friends. I don't know him. There's no opportunity for me to go and speak to him privately. The opportunity that was offered to me was to have him on my channel to promote his new book and to recommend people to go to his tour stop. And a part
Oh,
of this is, you know, I fear that people assume that these debates that they see online, that these calls and conversations they see online are something where people just walk into a room and they just start talking. They talk about whatever, and there's no filters. Now, usually the way that it happens, especially with people like Dawkins who have a lot of clout and a lot of power, is you give them all of the things you're going to talk about beforehand. You agree on what you're going to talk about beforehand so that he can't be embarrassed, so that he can't be caught off guard, and so that he is not associating with people who he doesn't want to be associated with. And so the opportunity to just walk in the room and be like, hey man, I want to, just have a nice conversation where I gently challenge you. That's not really possible when you know the way that the production world kind of works. And also given the fact that as I said in my Dawkins video, our friend Steve Woodford from Rationality Rules has actually been working directly with Dawkins' primary media guy to try to set up a conversation where he would, gently challenge the anti-trans talking points that Dawkins has espoused. And they've been trying to hook that up for over a year. And Richard Dawkins has pretty much emphatically said he will not have that conversation with anyone publicly or privately. And so, me going and trying to do a Daryl Davis on Richard Dawkins would require Richard Dawkins to be willing to have that conversation in the first place, which it doesn't seem that he is, even given the opportunity.
Yeah, you would have to befriend him behind the scenes.
Well, and also, specifically, if Drew were to pull a Daryl Dawkins, Drew would need to be trans and make friends with Dawkins without Dawkins knowing it, so that Dawkins could see the humanity in Drew. And like the specifics, the specifics of the story that you brought up are definitely not ones where Drew would be the right person to do that. And then again, I feel like you're bringing up two very different things that have two very different goals. And so drawing those lines can help you choose what's best for the situation. So if the goal is to change a person's mind by having a conversation with that person, then you the way you and Drew were talking about, hey, let's sit down and just talk, right? You and me, right? Without any of the worry about being embarrassed or whatever. That's a great way to do that. Doing it on a stage, that's not the place for that. The entire reason people have debates is so that they can talk at each other and the people watching can get entertained and or get convinced.
Yeah.
But the goal
is... It's a reality TV show.
Yeah, it is theater. I've done debates. I've done big debates, and it's theater. It is entirely theater. You can be absolutely right, and if the other person is just a better public speaker, then they can seem right no matter what it is. So if the goal is to, do this theater show, then okay, but you should not hope to convince your interlocutor to come to your side, because that's just not what the format of debate is. That said, there's another piece to it, and it's platforming. What is there to lose by having people on who you disagree with? Well, what's the name of the doctor who said that vaccines give you autism?
Andrew Wakefield.
Okay, so if you talk about vaccines, and Andrew Wakefield really, really wants everyone to know that, vaccines give people autism, how many times are you going to have Andrew Wakefield on? How many times are you going to give space for just wrong people? How much do they deserve that attention?
Yeah, I would say once.
Once?
and to foster a relationship behind the scenes, and
Well,
potentially do the Daryl Dawkins thing.
no. Again, those are different. Those are different goals. One of them is to change their opinion, but if you're doing this kind of publicly and all of that, it's not about changing their mind. It's about having the conversation for people to watch. Right? It doesn't matter that Andrew Wakefield is still going to believe what he believes. You're not trying to convince him. You're trying to challenge his ideas publicly so that people can see how wrong it is. Right? That's what the goal of that would be.
Right.
It's not to convince him. It's not to pull a Daryl Dawkins or Daryl
Davis.
Daryl Davis. I'm so bad.
Daryl
It's not to pull a Daryl Davis. It's to publicly show the world what a fucking moron he is. And that is absolutely what you should do if you have Andrew Wakefield on your show. Is you need to very clearly, very loudly, and very, concisely tear him the fuck apart, because what he's doing is making the world a worse place. In the same way, I think that if you have the opportunity to sit down with Richard Dawkins and you don't tear him the fuck apart about getting way the fuck out of his lane and absolutely spouting some pseudo psychological bullshit, then I feel like you're not doing a good thing. you're just giving him a platform.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what is the harm of what is the harm of having, a person like that on your show over and over again? You're just giving them a platform for what? Why? Why do they deserve it? Why does Dawkins deserve to be on Drew's channel or anybody else's channel?
I'd say sunlight's the best disinfectant. Like, these people hide and congregate in corners of the internet, and they grow and grow and grow until it's out of control. And there's a way to mediate that or to head that off would be to shine light on them and get them on your show, make counterpoints, make them look, like you said, kind of ridiculous.
No,
that would be
the best that you're going to get is, well, you have a different opinion and we just don't agree. Bullshit. I don't have a different opinion than Andrew Wakefield. Andrew Wakefield is a piece of shit. Andrew Wakefield makes the world a worse place and has actively, by his decisions, made the world a worse place by existing in it. And Richard Dawkins, seriously, I honestly dislike that Andrew Wakefield still exists as a human.
I think you're right.
Yeah, and looking at Richard Dawkins, like, I love the fact that he did all of the stuff that he did when it comes to evolutionary biology and books that he's written, but he's made his shit about anti-trans, arguments and about, having this very specific discussion and filling his life with people who are only going to tell him yes and only going to agree with him. And in that, he's making things worse. I don't want to, I don't think that you're going to get that, like, he was proven wrong. If anything, you are going to present his opinions as actual competition. If I have an expert in vaccines, should I give equal time to Andrew Wakefield just because Andrew Wakefield has a different opinion? No.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
No, because
let me lay this out the way that I see it. So, I guess the first thing I should say is I agree with you, Jacob, that these ideas do need to be challenged. Like, we can't just ignore them and be like, oh, the extremism will go away if we just ignore it, right? Like, that's obviously not true. So you're right that we do need to shine some amount of sunlight on it in some way, which is one of the reasons I made the video where I did call out the things that Dawkins says, where I did, debunk things, talk about how they're pseudoscientific. And it's why I've done that with a lot of other, kind of transphobic people and transphobic claims. What I'm curious about, though, is I actually heard this from Richard Dawkins' manager, his handler, after this. He kind of was upset at me, insisting he wasn't offended, but was kind of upset at me and saying, like, why won't you just have the conversation? You're forming an echo chamber. Why won't you just debate people that you disagree with? Because you don't interact with perspectives you don't agree with. I'm like, then what are you responding to then? Because what I did was disagree with and try to debunk, perspective, whatever that I don't agree with. Why does debate count more than what I do, which is basically essays where I cite sources and it's in kind of more of a literary form than a live debate form.
That's a good point.
It definitely feels
And
like
That's a good point.
it definitely feels like
to
that
Eric's
goes. Go
point,
ahead.
it's a practicality of the situation is if I wanted to debate Dawkins, the only way that I could do this would be to play civility politics, where as I say in the Dawkins video that I made, I'd have to tell him that this is simply a matter of a difference of opinion, that I don't think that what he's doing is harmful, that I think that he's a great person, that I think that he should be saying these things effectively, and that we basically have an equal, level of credibility on these issues. What we're saying is basically either perspective is just as good. And that's why I'll have the conversation with him. Some people will take debates where you can be more basically hostile and more honest, where you can say what you're saying is harmful. I think that what you're doing is awful and it's damaging people in this specific way, and you're responsible for that. Some people will take debates like that. Richard Dawkins won't even take debates where people disagree with him, period. Like, he won't take debates. He won't take debates at all on this subject. And so kind of, I have seen kind of people, maybe not even intentionally, laying more blame on me for not taking a debate that Dawkins was the one to turn down, because I'm not completely clear on how it tracks. And I don't mean to say, Jacob, that you are like coming at me or you're being an asshole, because you're not. I believe that you're asking this in good faith, and I appreciate that. But I don't know, does my perspective on that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Absolutely. Absolutely. I will ask something kind of tangentially related, because, there's this thing that happens whenever these.
Jacob?
Uh-oh, got a Droove situation.
Oh no. Okay, we'll give Jacob a second. Hopefully Jacob will come back. Jacob dropped. No.
I am interested to keep that conversation going, because the people who I have heard this point of Jacob's many times in my own comments, but it's not really possible to start a meaningful conversation in that in that medium. And no, I'd be interested in talking to Jacob more about this, see if he has any other points maybe I haven't thought of or addressed before.
I love that. I think that there's more to be had in that conversation about, in this meta discussion that you two are having. The only thing that I really have to bring to the table is pointing out that, what is the right format for your goal? The right format matters. And if your goal is to convince one person, then a debate on a stage is not the way to do it. A call-in show is not the way to do it. Having them on your show so you can challenge them is not the way to do it. That's how you can change the perspectives and opinions of people who are watching. But the format matters.
Format matters. Yeah, absolutely. And I have to say, to Jacob's point, if Richard Dawkins was a friend of mine and I could get in a room with him privately and I could discuss these things with him in good faith, just trying to influence him alone, I would do that. As soon as I saw him, if we were friends and I saw him saying this stuff, I would go to him in good faith and try to have this conversation with him as a friend, and rather than making a call out video, right? And maybe eventually I would make a call out video, because I'm beholden more to civil rights, social justice, and the truth than I am to any one friendship.
Yeah.
Like, Eric is one of my closest friends in the world, but at a certain point, is there a point where I would make a call out video if Eric was doing the same things Dawkins is doing? I would, and Eric would do the same thing to me, and that's something that we respect about each other, right?
Absolutely.
So
absolutely, Drew, I love you as much as someone could love another friend. truly. And also, it's not an unconditional love. You know, if you went off the rails, I think one of the reasons you care about me is because I do care enough to call you out, and I do listen to you. And if you go a place that I can't follow, then the best thing I can do is let you know. You know, and if you do damage, the best thing I can do is try and help mitigate that damage. But no, I totally agree.
Yeah, and I mean, I also say, like, I know people, like, I'm friends with people who work behind the scenes in the Dawkins tour. Like, I know a lot about the Dawkins tour because I know the people who, like, ran the Dawkins tour. Like, I know them; they're my friends, and they're still my friends. And I have challenged the fuck out of them for their like, you know, somewhat supportive Dawkins, and yet I'm not making a call out video about them because there's a lot less use in that than actually challenging the man himself.
Yeah. All right. So we got so many more callers now. That's amazing. Good. Okay. So before we do, I'm going to put the phone number up one more time because I see people asking in the comments, how do I call in? What's going on? If you are new to watching the show or you don't know what's going on, this is a live call-in show. We never know what's coming next. The best we can do is hope that we can respond as well as possible. That is the nature of live, and that is the vulnerable position that we are in. We are lucky to have a call screener at least, and if you want to call in, you can call 412-SKEPGEN. That's 412-753-7436, or you can go to tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. Either way, it's toll free, tiny.cc/SKEPGEN. Our call screener is waiting to talk to you, and we would love to hear what's on your mind, what's going on. Let's talk. Do you disagree with us? Challenge us, because that's what we love the most, and that's what people want to see. Challenge us. What's going on? That said, this does feel a very different piece of the coin, and it feels like it's about allyship. So let's talk to Joshua in South Carolina. Joshua, you're live on the show.
Hi, Eric. Hi, Drew. I wish I could challenge you, but I just agree with you so darn much.
That's sweet. That feels very indulgent.
It is, yes. It was meant to be. No, and if Jacob calls back, feel free to drop me and take that again, because he actually was sort of answering via the conversation with you guys a lot of the questions that I have kind of wanted to raise myself, which are, how do you defend trans people against bigotry in a personal and professional sense, like especially against people who don't necessarily seem receptive to it at first.
The medium matters.
I actually have
a lot.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the medium matters a lot. I mean, making a video. Okay, let's say that I have a trans, or like I have a friend who is like, you know, kind of starting to buy into the idea that teachers are grooming kids to be trans. And then I have, you know, I know somebody that's saying this stuff very publicly, and I don't have like a personal relationship with them. Say that, like, you know, there's Richard Dawkins out here, and then there's also a friend of mine who is just saying the same things as Richard Dawkins, and both of them deserve challenge. The way that I challenge the friend that I do have the opportunity to go to in private to use the connection that we have to influence them, that's not going to be the same way that I engage with Dawkins. And it's not going to be the same way that I engage with people in YouTube comments. It's not going to be the same way that I interact with people who I may know but don't have a personal, you know, close relationship with. Mm-hmm. The medium of communication, the level of connection that you have with people really, really matters. So, I mean, I tend to think that one of the best things that you can possibly do if you do have a friend who is saying some like transphobic stuff is to go to them in private first, for the fact that you have more possibility and opportunity to influence them for the better if you do that first. If you kind of immediately make a call out of them on Facebook or any maybe less cursed social media platform, then it does stand to ruin your opportunity to use the connection and trust that you have in order to hopefully influence them for the better. If you do want to break off friendships eventually because people are being transphobic, like that's super valid. But I tend to think that going to somebody in private first is usually a good idea, if only for the fact that you're going to be more effective of an ally in doing so.
I was talking to, back when I lived in Austin, I had a friend whose family was getting really, really into the alt-right. And his brother was a newly minted Boogaloo boy.
Oh, God. Wow. That's, holy shit.
I
That's
just made
really
a face.
far.
You didn't see, but
Yeah, Drew, it's a friend that you know, by the way. We'll talk off air. But
Yeah.
this newly minted Boogaloo boy is itching for violence. If I were to meet a Boogaloo boy and they are saying some racist shit, I've had my ass beat by racists before. Not because I was disagreeing with them, but just because I was brown enough for them to care. So I tend to shy away from those in real life. But when I was talking to my friend, when he was talking to his brother, he told him, that's fucking awful. Fuck you. I want no relationship with the weird bullshit that you've got going on in your life. That is so deeply vile. You disgust me. That might be one of the only people who's close enough to this guy for that to hear that.
Yeah.
Right? I think that you as an ally need to look at the relationships you have and recognize that you might be uniquely situated to be listened to by people who are bigoted in whatever way. And the people who are too afraid to, or are not in a position to stand up to them, would really benefit from you doing that if you have that opportunity. You know,
I try to whenever I can, because I do have some trans friends, and I feel like it's not it shouldn't be, they shouldn't have to always be the ones to like explain why they have the right to exist as they do. So it shouldn't be work that needs to be done at all, but I'm happy to help if I can, where I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a strange position that I think that like especially cis white men find themselves in, where we're probably the most likely category of people to have people in our lives that are
just casually
really shitty in that way. Yeah, or just just like casually against the existence of some group of people. And so we are kind of in a unique position to be like, well, I mean, if I know this stuff, if I can have this conversation so that somebody else doesn't have to if I can defend somebody else's right to exist for them rather than them having to be burdened by that all the time, that is something that we can do. That said, it's also quite a balance, because you want to make sure that you're not like speaking for a group authoritatively
as an authority or anything like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a tightrope walk, I think. But I don't think that the balance can't be struck.
And the other side of it, like the second part to your question here in the call-in sheet is how do you make the bigots care? Drew, tell me if you disagree. You can't. You can't. Make
a large part of the time. A large part of the time you can't. It depends on where the bigotry is coming from.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't is a valid answer.
They are going to care potentially if they care about you, their relationship with you, if they respect you, sure. But in the same way that people will say, hey, how can I deconvert my family of ultra religious right wing, Christian nationalists? You can't.
Well, you can't.
No, unless they're well, and the reason you can't is because you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? You can try and force that conversation on people, but ultimately, if they don't want to have that conversation with you, they're not gonna. And so the
Correct me
question,
if I'm wrong. I feel like it might be in many ways just like a simple function of like how many people around them hold that value. Like,
yeah,
if like I can explain to my dad, for example, why why it's totally fine to be trans and it's a real thing and all of that. But like if I don't live near him and I'm the only one in his life that would say these things, then it sort of doesn't matter. Like, well, I mean, it might be the case that he's gonna like say, oh, okay, I guess I get it, but it's not a value that's enforced apart from just me.
no, and
So, when he goes to his friends, then
yeah, and it can often be enforced in the other direction. In the case of people like Dawkins, in the case of people like Christian
Right.
nationalists, they've made their identity this. It's not just that they have this opinion and whatever. No, they're making a big part of who they are and what they're doing this thing. And if that's the case, there are so many more things that are influencing it, right? All the friends that you have made, the community that you've built around you is now hinging on this opinion. And so it's so much harder to challenge those things when you put your identity, your sense of who you are tied to it,
Yeah.
So that
So-
actually brings me back to a specific case, because you can see on the screen, I'm from South Carolina. I actually happen to be in the district that is represented by Nancy Mace, who, as you may know, was one of the ones who introduced a bathroom bill for Congress that would only affect the single incoming, well, I guess not incoming anymore. It's just Sarah McBride, the only like trans congressperson in the whole bill, just about. Well, that is out at least. And so part of what I know I can do is write to my representative, but I genuinely, I haven't made that call yet because I genuinely get the sense that like that it's just not gonna reach her. And I mean, I guess I could write multiple letters, but I don't know like what I should even say, because I feel like she's just going to be like, okay, another woke liberal doesn't like what I'm doing, boo-hoo, whatever. But
Yeah.
like, what do I even say to someone like that?
You arrange your priorities. You're not. I think that the amount of time and effort that you would put into trying to change their mind, you could get a lot more return on investment if you help campaign somebody who's going to replace them. It's at a certain point, there are consequences to your actions. And if somebody's going to be a fucking bigot and they lose their position of office, if they lose their friend group or whatever, those are social consequences to being shitty. That's just what happens. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. If your representative in local government is a fucking bigot, then make sure everybody knows. Help support whoever is going to be replacing them during the next election cycle. But I think they'll probably pay more attention to that than a strongly worded letter personally written to them.
Okay.
Yeah. Joshua, I really appreciate your call. Thank you.
Thank you for taking me. Have a good one.
You too. Okay. Ready to move on to the next caller?
Yeah.
We have one in the Netherlands. Let's talk to Ted in the Netherlands. Ted, you're live on the show.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. How are you? What do you want to talk about?
I'm good. I'm So I don't know if you can read my prompt, but just I made it a bit cryptic just for algorithm purposes, I guess. But I'm a long time listener of yours, and I know that you always criticize like biblical Christianity and the slaughter of the Amalekites, etc., etc., etc.
Hmm.
But it seems to me that when there are people in real time applying these doctrines, it's like it's crickets from the atheist community, I would say. I don't know if you saw Trump's UN ambassador saying that Israel has a biblical right to the West Bank, or when Netanyahu would quote stuff directly from the book and use it to justify the murder of like children, etc., etc. Even their rabbis would give them like certain like passes to do certain things in Gaza that I'm not going to mention on call, but if you dig around, you'll you will understand. It's basically the how the Bible tells people to treat like Gentiles, which is one of the most like vicious things you can imagine. And they give them like a ticket to just do that, and like they do it on their national television, and it's insane to me. It's literally it's a theocratic state, and their entire doctrine is like based on that, and it's just I wish I heard more criticism of that, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's valid. I'm wondering, I'm wondering who you might be talking about when you are referencing the atheist community or atheist figures. I will say, on the theme of challenging authority here,
I know I know they're in figures. Yeah,
What's that?
Sorry to interrupt. I'm not talking about like. Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm not like talking about prominent figures like Dawkins or even Matt Dillahunty, because I know that there are certain like red lines that people are not like people who have a certain platform can't like cross. But I specifically called in today because I figured I could maybe get a hold of Eric, because I would say I might consider myself a fan, and it's just it would rub me the wrong way if I didn't get like okay, you don't necessarily have to give me a clear stance, but I would like to hear more like
Absolutely.
what you think of that.
Yeah. Okay. So the just for people who are watching, this video is probably going to join the several other recent videos that are going to be demonetized. And I'm totally okay with that. But if you want to support the show, consider going to patreon.com/skepticgeneration. It's the only way that's going to stay on the air, because this is totally getting demonetized. All right, let's talk about Israel.
I apologize.
No, it's important. And I have not been super clear. And so let me be. Israel is a nation. Judaism is a religion. And while Judaism is the state religion of Israel, you can be Jewish and not be for awful things that the nation of Israel is doing in the West Bank. And so because of that, I draw that line of separation, right? I draw that line of separation.
And I agree with you.
Yeah, I draw that line of separation because I want to have room for people to go, oh, Eric's not against Judaism. Eric is against, systematic violence against a group of people. And the thing is, there are a lot of things that if I did that, like, I feel like I absolutely, like, you want to talk about that? Let's talk about one of the multiple Armenian genocides at the hands of Turkey. Let's talk about the unbelievable amount of violence in Africa right now, with entire communities, suffering after coup after coup after coup, militarized, young children, right? How about in Mexico, where cartels are absolute, like, there are so many fucked up things that are happening, and state sponsored violence. Let's talk about what's going on in Ukraine, right? I mean, there's so much there that I think that what I did is I looked at, okay, what is the scope of my show? My scope is about challenging religion. If somebody wanted to call in and say, hey, I'm Jewish and I believe that, the state-sponsored violence taking place in the West, in the West Bank is a manifestation of my religious views, I'd be like, okay, I'm challenging that. Let's go. But
Yeah. Can
and
I interject if you don't mind?
sure, I just want to also
So
add though that no matter how big your platform is, you should not abstain from that if that is something that you feel like your platform is useful in calling out. It just feels personally like, anyway. I'm Ted. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, yeah, I don't mean to cut you off, but so I agree with you about all the various conflicts that maybe should get more spotlight, but like it would be a bit the scope of your, so for example, when certain groups carry out vicious um, um, things in the name of Islam, they are rightfully criticized. And I'm one of the first people to criticize them, coming from a Muslim background, not necessarily a believer, but I would be the first one to criticize when it's done in the name of Islam. So I would like to have the same space when it's done in the name of. I would like. I don't really necessarily want to specify Judaism, because I think Christian Zionism is an even bigger sponsor than the Jewish people per se. I think like Christian Zionism and their kind of. I watch your show a lot, and I listen to so many of these theists who come on, and they use the existence of Israel as some kind of proof that their prophecies have come to pass, and so and so and so. So it seems to me that it is a bit more in the scope of your show than say what's happening in Africa, for example.
There are a few things there, and you raise a couple really good points, but there are a few that I want to make sure that I knock down. One of them is I don't rail against violence in the Middle East often. I don't.
Yeah, and I noticed that.
Yeah, and the reason isn't apathy. The reason for me is because, number one, it feels like I'm just doing it to make myself feel good. It's self-congratulatory in a way that I don't feel like, number one, I don't feel like I'm having an impact. And number two, I would only do it so that I could signal to other people how awesome I am. And that feels weird. I want to address it when it gets brought up. And there are people who have absolutely turned to Torah and said, hey, here are things that were predicted that came to pass. And those people are not necessarily pro or anti-Zionist, and they're not necessarily pro or anti, specific actions by Israel. There's talking about their religious beliefs. There are a lot of Christians who I've talked to who are very not Christian nationalist. And so assuming that just because they have a pro-Christianity argument means that they're Christian nationalists is a weird leap for me. And so I think that I provide that much charity to everybody, right? Meet them where they're at. And if they say, hey, I'm for violence, then okay, cool. Let's talk about that. That is the most important thing. But I'm just not going to assume it.
No, I agree with you. It would be a bit of a leap to assume that any Christian is a Christian nationalist. But when like things when things are said like Israel has a biblical right to exist in where it is, or when like I said, like when they used its existence as some kind of like proof of their religion. It's I don't know how, maybe in the US political sphere I'm not very well versed, but I don't know how much these people have influence in order to so it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So they prop up Israel in order to in order to what's the word, prove their faith. Okay, not prove, but you know what I mean. Like
justify.
It's just like a prop it up, basically.
Yeah.
Or like I said, like at the beginning of the call, it's not so much like Israel is a state that is committing violence. It's like I understand that, but when Bibi Netanyahu comes on national TV and quotes things from the Torah to justify what happened in Gaza, it like it is a religious like um um, militia, much like ISIS would be. And it's like if if we're not criticizing that when we're criticizing religion, like what's really the point? What? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm rambling at this point, but
No.
it's just yeah, it's just a
Yeah, I think that is a, and I'm Ted. People have used that argument to shut me up before,
mhm.
and they've used it in different ways, right? So when here in the United States, it was a big discussion about whether or not gay people should be allowed to be married. And while that discussion was happening, anytime I brought it up, people would say, hey, there's a war going on in Afghanistan right now. We need to be focusing on that. And there's no point in talking about anything else. You know, we need to be focusing on our troops who are overseas and dying right now, who are fighting Al Qaeda. And I think we can do both. And I think that the people who are good at it should be the ones who are leading the charge on each thing. I think there are enough of us, and I think that there are enough causes that we should not be cutting each other down in order to make ourselves the only most important thing, you know?
Oh no, and I don't mean to do that at all, by the way.
I,
Okay, so maybe I'll ask you a question. Like,
Sure.
what would you consider the biggest dangers of religious dogma? Because
Theocracy.
as someone who comes from a place where people have used religious dogma to justify killing each other, I would always consider that the most dangerous aspect of it.
Sure. Absolutely. There are a ton of insidious parts of it, but like, I'll give you an example. There's a YouTuber who I would love to get to talk to. She left the Mormon faith, and she's been doing a lot of videos about, you know, her experience as a Mormon and kind of leaving, you know, all of that. And she's not taking this position that everyone needs to not be Mormon anymore and screw Mormonism. Her place that she's kind of carved out for herself is one of going, hey, you're on your way out, you know, I have these things in common too. You're not alone. And also, hey, are you wondering about what life was like for us when we were on that side? Let me share that with you. We all have our own positions in that. I think that there needs to be also a place for people who are creating a safe spot for people to leave that radical worldview, you know, and it's going to look different. It's going to look different than just outright anger. And, you know, it's, I don't know. It takes all types. And I don't think any of them are less valid. Yeah. So maybe it's not going to look like exactly what you see, and that's totally okay. But I don't think that any of them are wrong. And me, Ted, I'm going to tell you, I feel so badly informed that I think that if I were to really speak out about what's going on, I worry that given my platform, I'm going to wind up putting my foot in my mouth and do more harm than good. I want to be really clear that I would rather point people towards good resources than screw up something that important.
Yeah, and I really want to make it clear that I wasn't like coming for you necessarily. Like,
No. But the here's the thing is, I'm not criticizing you. I'm criticizing the argument that you brought. And the argument that you brought was, why are you focusing on X when you should be focusing on Y? And that doesn't help. And so I want to make sure that I address that.
Okay.
Drew, what do you think?
Yeah,
Anything
no,
to add?
I mean,
I think I
I'll just say I think that Ted makes a very salient point in saying, you know, what is maybe the most dangerous thing that religions can do. And if you're going to be criticizing, religions, philosophy of religion, religious harm, whatever, wouldn't you want to criticize the biggest thing that they can do that's harmful? I think it's really valid. And a lot of the conversations that are had um, around like philosophy of religion and things like that in the atheist world, especially when you get closer to the top, they are just all theoretical. They're all abstract. And the reason for that is because the way to succeed as an atheist content creator and get beyond just the atheist community and become popular above that is actually to appeal to Christians, because there's more Christians than there are atheists. And so the reason why, the people like Dawkins and any other, like, whether they're a YouTuber or maybe less likely a TikToker or a writer or whatever, and they're growing in popularity really fast, it's basically because they're appealing to Christians. That's usually the way that it works. And so there's a reason why they wouldn't call out something like that. They'll talk about, theoretically, if you interpret the Bible this way, then the Bible, condones slavery. And that was really bad back then. Of course, we know that now Christians are not bad people and Christians don't own slaves and wouldn't own slaves. But back then that was bad. So let's have an abstract conversation about that. Let's talk about the Amalekites, because that's a conversation that will attract atheists, but it won't offend Christians enough to get them to unpledge from Patreon, right? So like that's the way that it usually works. But at a certain point, I think you're right, Ted. What is the fucking point if we're not actually, doing the real world applications of criticizing religion or criticizing religious harm? If we're not actually talking about any of the big stuff, the big things that are happening because of it, are we doing this just because it's to make content? I mean, for some people, yeah, it is. It's just making content. And the ones that are the most popular, I say this as somebody like maybe even risking my own reputation here and saying it, like, the more popular you are, the more likely it is that you're doing it for the content a lot of the time. And yeah, I think you were talking about Alyssa Grenfell there, Eric. Alyssa Grenfell is someone who I would say defies that trend. Like, I don't think that she's just doing it for like the content. I mean, of course, it's like a successful career for her at this point, but I see her actually using her specific knowledge to do the best that she can in a specific way that has practical applications. But like, unfortunately, I think that Alyssa Grenfell at her level is almost alone. It's very sad.
It is,
and so
because
for me,
the generosity and her enthusiasm for sharing is so infectious. It's so contagious that you can't help but be like, oh, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. But no, I mean, for me, I think at a certain point, I decided, okay, I have education in human sexuality. This whole thing about like gender diversity, about trans people, like, this is a religious thing. This is a religious discussion. And so my content has always been about religion. I also have some actual formal education that makes me an effective person to speak on this stuff. So I'm going to start shifting my content to talking about these kinds of things. And I've been doing that since, 2023. And I kind of made that commitment to doing that. And then also, talking about basically the way that Satanism and satanic panic is being used in these conversations. So learning more about trans issues and trans rights, and learning more about how supreme evil narratives are in play, and in the practical things that they actually are employed to do. And speaking against that has been like my project. And so, maybe it is valid to say like, hey, Netanyahu's kind of doing the same thing. Maybe you want to turn your attention to that. I do appreciate that. And it's something that I should look into. I kind of spend most of my time reading about extremely transphobic shit and formulating arguments against it.
Yeah.
But maybe there's a little room in there to talk about Bibi, right?
Just before we started this episode, and we were prepping for the air, Drew was telling me about how his YouTube algorithm is so messed up now from the research. I'm so sorry, my friend.
It's super cooked.
Ted,
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, I enjoy the debating atheists on evolution content just as much as the next person. It's just that when the war was happening, it felt like a big elephant in the room when I was kind of watching some of your shows, and it kind of just
yeah.
just
So,
got me off. You know?
yeah, I honestly, I do not know how to convey the depth of despair I feel when I see shit like that. And
No, I get
just,
it. I get it.
well, just because I'm good at speaking about some things doesn't mean I'm good at other things. And especially when it comes to violence against innocent people, like, I am so outside of my ability to help that I think all I'm going to do is lend despair. I'm gonna do my best, and I'm gonna try and push back where I can, where I know that I can. I also don't want to make things worse.
No,
You know.
I get it. It's good to have this conversation anyway. And
Yeah.
Sorry, I got your video
Would
demonetized,
totally,
but,
absolutely. I mean, just the
okay.
keywords alone are going to get the video off, but we appreciate it, and I don't want you to think that I don't care, and I don't want you to think that I'm avoiding it because I'm looking for views or clicks or whatever the case is. I genuinely feel unqualified, and
Yeah, I know, and it's really like it's really outside most like it's sad to really say, but this is like goes beyond any just one person. It's like it's a geopolitical thing that like really none of us could have a hand in unless there's like proper organization. But
no, and
way outside.
And if I were to get started, the funny thing is being a content creator, if I bring up one thing, everyone else is going to go, "Oh, Eric must care less about my thing." And like the fact is we can talk about Duterte, you know, and leadership in the Philippines and how there's fucking craziness going on over there, or the rise of you know, really authoritarian, you know, shit coming back in Japan, like. Saying
the genocide against Uyghur Muslims in China is also kind of
still
still happening.
God. And so like, if I don't bring all of those up, then people are going to, so Eric cares about this, but not, it's crazy. I have no idea how to handle it. I'm going to do my best, but I do want you to know that my heart's with you, and I don't want you to think that you're alone. I'm going to do the best, you know, I can.
Yeah, no, thanks for the kind words anyway, and I think I took up a lot of your time.
No worries. We have someone coming up next.
Yeah,
we have someone coming up next whose pronouns are truth and freedom. So we're going to be hopping over to that person. Ted, thank you. And Drew, is there anything else you want to say before I let Ted go?
I think I'm about to really, really miss Ted.
Agreed. Ted, take care.
Thank you for the good call, Ted.
Yeah. Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.
Oh, that's going to be fun to put out as a clip because people are going to have to wait an entire week to see what we're alluding to. But for people who are watching live, let's move on and talk to Chuck in Oregon, whose pronouns are truth and freedom. Chuck, you're live on the show.
It's morning here on the West Coast, so I'm saying good morning. I don't know if you guys are on the East Coast or not.
Chuck, I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
I'm deep in the heart of Texas.
Bum, 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 bum.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What's going on, Chuck?
Well, I would like to put some things in historical context. I think it will help clear up some things, if I may.
Maybe. What's up?
Okay, well, let's go back to 1215 in the Magna Carta. The people in their majesty rose above the king and told the king that your job is to represent us with other kings.
Okay.
We have the power to govern ourselves in our own communities. Okay?
Chuck?
Yes.
So I just want to make sure that we're getting context here, because I know you're diving into like supporting your position, but without knowing what the position is at first, it's hard to follow. So I'm just going to read the note we have, and maybe that's going to help give some context to what you're saying, okay? It says that
Okay.
you are deist, you're a believer of some type, and you want to talk about the mind control tactics that the ruling class has used to divide the people.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I'm getting to.
We just went from talking about violence in the Middle East, and before that we were talking about atheism. And so without context, what you just said makes very little sense. So why do you want to talk?
Understand.
Yeah. So why do you want to talk about the division of the ruling class? Why should we care? And why bring this to us?
Because people are under a form of mind control through the education system and the media and pop culture to such a degree that they are unable to discern truth from falsehood.
Okay. Mind control is an interesting word. Go ahead, Drew.
I'm just wondering, there's a lot of people in the educational system, and there's a lot of media, and there's a lot of pop culture. Can we get specific?
I'm going to get specific. You're
Okay.
taking me off my topic, and you're want to get me bogged down in minutia.
Well, I wanted to just.
Big picture. I'm a big picture guy.
But if we don't know what like the context for it, no one is going to follow
Well, I'm
you.
trying to put things. I would have been through with my argument by now. Okay,
Go for it.
I would have been long past it.
No worries. I'm giving you the stage. Go for it. Magna Carta. They told the king that his job is to represent them to other kings.
Yeah, to other kings.
Go ahead.
But they had the right to govern themselves in their own communities. Are you with me?
Sure.
Okay. The Constitution is based on the Magna Carta. The federal government was not delegated the power to govern the people. The people have the right to govern themselves in their own communities. It's a federal government, which means it's a federation of independent sovereign countries, and the federal government was designed to be an ambassador on behalf of the states until Congress declared war. That's why they all say we're war on this, war on that, because as long as the federal government is declaring war on something, then they're in charge and the people aren't. Are you with me?
Not quite.
Can you give me a specific example of someone saying that?
Saying what?
I mean, can you give me a specific example of someone declaring war for the purpose of, just so I can get the context of what you're talking about?
You probably aren't old enough to remember the war on drugs, but there was a war on drugs.
Yeah.
Remember? Yeah.
Yeah.
Which drugs won? But yes, I do. Yeah, I do remember that. Okay, so yeah, there was a war on drugs.
And there's a lot of.
Can you give me a specific name of someone? I'm trying to put specifics to your point. You know, can you give me a specific example of a specific person on a specific date, you know, saying such and such, and then like demonstrably what the effects of that were? Because it's difficult for me to understand what your point is with such generalities.
So by the way, I just want to interject.
It sounds to me that you're experiencing cognitive dissonance.
I just want to interject. I have a quick tech thing to adjust. I'm still here, but I'm going to put the video on Drew. I'm here and I'm listening. Yeah.
Sure.
It sounds to me that you're experiencing cognitive dissonance.
Because I asked for a specific example of your point.
Well, you're trying to take me off topic, which will prevent us from getting to the truth.
By asking you for a specific example of your point. I haven't said I disagree with you. I'm just asking for a specific example of your point.
Well,
I'm not sure if that's off topic.
What I'm trying to point out is that by going in this direction, you are going to prevent me from taking you to where the truth is.
I'm asking you where the truth is by asking for a specific example of the truth.
Okay. Those who believe the federal government has the power to govern the people are conservatives.
Okay.
Those who advocate for the Constitution, the federal Constitution, are liberals. So everything's flipped. The right-wingers are the liberals, the left-wingers are the fascist totalitarians. Are you with me?
No.
Can you give me a specific example of liberals being fascist totalitarians?
Yes. The progressive income tax.
Is fascist and totalitarian?
Yes.
How so?
Because the people are supposed to own the means of production through local tax and regulatory policy. It's a decentralized economic system which enables political and economic power. You don't have it.
Yeah,
which
Chuck.
enables political and economic power to be distributed equally among the people.
Chuck.
Political and economic power equally among the people.
Chuck.
Equality,
Chuck, are you just repeating yourself over and over again because you don't want to hear us respond to you?
You're interrupting me. I want to make sure you understand it. I'm trying to get past your mind control programming.
My mind control programming. I'm glad you think that I went to school for that. Chuck, listen to me.
That's what you went to school
Chuck,
for.
I'm not even disagreeing with you on the ought statements that you're making. It is just such a jumble of things that you are really doing whatever point you're making a disservice. And so I want to clarify a couple of really important things. Number one, the Magna Carta was important in shaping how, people talked about and how the Constitution was drafted, but that was not the only influence. There were tons and tons of people philosophically talking about, liberty, about social contract theory. There were discussions about how, native groups in the United States were doing things and how they were forming their societies. What we owed to each other and how we should organize ourselves were big pieces of that as well. Now, if you want to move into people owning the means of production, you're talking about something that happened in the 1800s, over 100 years after the formation of this country. And by the way, that has to do with communism. That is not an influence on the founding fathers. Now, if you want to talk about whether or not we should, I agree. But you're bringing something up so out of context and so not correct that it is very difficult to take you seriously. You're mixing things up hundreds of years apart that either have nothing to do with it or you think ought to be talked about. And I think we should talk about owning the means of production. I think we should talk about, decentralizing and breaking up, authoritarian control. All of that stuff I can be on board with. But when you bring it up in a not correct, untrue, ahistorical jumble that you did, it is hard to listen to. You are so wrong. I don't even know where to begin to picking you apart. And that's not even whether or not I agree with your point. Can you comprehend that? I am so caught up on how wrong historically you are that I don't even know how to get to the point where I'm wrong. Okay, so where do people owning the means of production come from, Chuck? Did Locke come up with that? Is that a Hobbesian ideal? Was that in the Magna Carta?
Classical republicanism of Greece and Rome.
Yeah, people owning the means of production.
Classical republicanism of Greece and Rome.
Has to do with people owning the means of production.
Yes.
Yeah, no, Chuck, that was an industrial revolution term. That is no older than 200, 300 years tops. The classic.
No, you're under mind control. I'm trying to break you free of you mind control here. Allow me. You're experiencing cognitive dissonance, and I understand.
Okay, what the fuck is cognitive dissonance to you, Chuck?
It's when you're shutting down emotionally because...
That's not what cognitive dissonance is. Try again. Do you know what the definition of cognitive dissonance is?
It's when you're
I'm experiencing
shutting down
very positive emotions right now for the record.
Because you're hearing things that don't jive with your perspective.
That's not what cognitive dissonance is. Take a breath.
Yes, it
Take a
is.
second. Because I know what it is, and I can correct you, but I'm really wanting to know, because you're using cognitive dissonance in a really weird way. So, right. So what is,
No.
do you want me to give you the definition? I feel like I might just be like gilding the lily here. Cognitive dissonance is when you hold...
I will be willing to hear your definition.
Sure. Cognitive dissonance is when you hold two opinions at the same time that cannot logically both be true at the same time. And it is the dissonance, it is the problem that you're having in your mind trying to resolve two things that you think are true when they don't, when they cannot be true at the same time. That's what cognitive dissonance is.
That's what you're doing. Yeah.
So
Because
cognitive dissonance
you're...
is not being wrong, and cognitive dissonance is not being all up in your feels. Cognitive dissonance is a very specific thing. When you accuse someone of something like that, at least make sure that you're making sense.
Yeah. Listen, I operate on a much deeper level than you guys, okay?
You sound like you are operating off the back of a cereal box, Chuck. What? I have no idea.
You're emotionally a child, okay? I'm 63-year-old man. You're still emotionally a child. Okay?
Good job, Chuck.
So you're talking to a 63-year-old. You're talking to a 63-year-old man.
Chuck,
okay?
Chuck, if you're going to bring up your age, then act like it. Act your age. Quit just throwing shit around like that. No one is going to listen to you. And if you got to 53 and got anyone to listen to you, I'm surprised if those are the tactics that you used. Chuck, if you want to be listened to, you came in assuming that I disagreed with you on a lot of things. I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. So, okay, you know what? For the purpose of conversation, I'm going to put away just how deeply incorrect you are about history, right? I am, because I want to listen to what you're trying to say about mind control. Drew wanted to get into the details with you. I'm happy to get into the details with you, right? What about war? What about all of that? Like, let's just move on so that I can hear what your point is. I don't want you to think that we didn't get to your point.
Okay, Marxism places control of the means of production in public hands. Are you with me?
Yep. And when did Marx live?
Why are you getting bogged down into bullshit? Why can't we just stay focused on the topic?
Okay, Chuck. So, yeah.
Don't get specific, Eric.
Right. People owning the means of production. Go for it. Do you think people should own the means of production?
Okay, right. So, the public owns the means of production. Now, what is public?
No, they don't. Public does not own the means of production.
In Florida.
No, Mark said the public control of the means of production. That is
no, he did not.
Yes, it is.
No, it doesn't,
You're
Chuck.
Lying. You're
I'm
ignorant
lying.
or you're lying.
Yeah, I'm.
You are ignorant or you're lying.
Okay, let me clarify, Chuck.
Capitalism is private ownership of the means of production. Am I wrong?
No, you're wrong though about the idea that public is defined. So what Marx wanted to do is he wanted the proletariat, the working class, to rise up against the owning class and seize the means of production. He just said that the public ought to... Chuck, are you listening or are you just waiting?
Reality.
Chuck.
Your mind is so owned you can't even face reality.
What the hell did I just say that had that response from you? I'm curious. What did I just say that has that response from you?
I stated...
No. What did I say that got that response from you?
You said... Why are you trying to?
No, because I'm so owned and I'm so mind controlled. Don't throw this back at me. What did I say that got that response from you? That I'm so mind controlled? Please, I want to know. What did I do?
We're getting bogged down in minutia.
No, you said something factually incorrect, and I corrected you.
Into minutia. You are taking us into minutia because you're too afraid to face the truth.
Okay, so is the truth that the people own the means of production?
Why aren't you listening to me?
I really thought Drew.
Why are you afraid to listen?
Drew,
I'll weigh in here because if we can't get into specifics, I don't think that we're going to really get anywhere, because if you can't, if we're just talking about theories and no facts, if we're talking about broad trends and no specifics, then it's not really possible to establish a fact.
I'm muting Chuck. That way you can talk.
Yeah, Chuck, the thing that I was going to say to you is the answer to why people may not be listening to you in this conversation or just generally is the way that you charge at this with such vitriol. And understand that you may have, grievances. You may have legitimate things that you're really upset about that you should be upset about.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then I want you to know that, like, you're worthwhile. You are worth having a relationship with. You are worth, you're worth just as much as I am as a person. That said, it is very difficult to listen when someone comes in charging at you saying, hey, I'm going to let you know why you're so dumb and why you're a liar and why you're mind controlled and why I operate on a higher level of existence and reality and intelligence than you. If you're having trouble having these conversations, I would say to
watch that back.
Look. Yeah, I mean, if someone came at you saying the exact same thing with the same energy, would you listen to them? Do you think that you would get somewhere? I'd ask you to consider that.
Yeah. So Chuck realized that he's muted and hung up. He got angry. Oh, okay. He got angry. He's just on a higher level than us, Drew.
Yeah.
Don't you know?
And one part of me, okay, so it was very funny in one way. Like, I don't know if you noticed, Eric, but I literally ducked off camera.
Yeah, what was that?
I was just laughing too hard. But at the same time, like, now, it's kind of sad. I mean, the guy is 63 years old and saying that he operates on a different, like, plane of existence, basically, than other people, which tells me that he sees himself as being apart from other people. And another way of putting that is, like, being lonely. I think that people get like this, and conspiracies and things like this breed in people's minds usually when they are, quite isolated. And I'd be kind of surprised I hope this is an online persona that he's assuming and he doesn't act like this in real life. If he does act like this in real life, then I think I would understand why he's so upset.
Yeah, I think
I wouldn't think a lot of people would be there listening to him.
No, I think he's probably a pill on Thanksgiving. I don't know. I feel like that Michael Jordan clip, stop it, get some help, is appropriate. Yeah, no, people like that exist. And I would be happy to entertain ideas about how the media shapes narratives. I think that's a really important conversation. And I think that it is a really big issue. I do not like capitalism at all. I am not a fan. I think that it is the reason for a lot of the world's problems. And the only way that I'm going to make that point in a way that anybody is going to listen or care about is if I am clear, concise, and factually accurate when it comes to important historical things like that, right?
And give specific examples.
Yeah. Like, if you want to talk about the formation of this country, fine, let's talk about it. But if you want to say that the founders of the United States were influenced by people who had not been born yet for another 100 years, that makes no sense. Or to say that ideas that were spawned out of the Industrial Revolution were present in ancient Greece, that's just factually untrue.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm kind of hearing is that I think this is just a general problem. For some reason, I've heard this really discussed as if it's a Gen Z specific problem, but there is a problem with like kind of political and historical and scientific illiteracy, where people think that learning about large systems in this very theoretical, abstract way allows them to draw conclusions about specific things. So, if you can learn what the Magna Carta was supposed to represent in the zeitgeist of the time, then you can understand that like Kamala is a terrorist. And it's like, you got to actually get into very specific details. You have to get into minutia of these things in order to establish this. And I don't say this because, neither one of us, Eric, are on the show wanting to defend like the big L liberals. I think we're fucking sick and tired of them at this point.
Absolutely.
Like, we are the right people to come to with your grievances about them, right? But I'm not going to be like, oh, the reason why, Kamala's bad is because she's like doing like mind control and she is like a communist or something. I'm like, no, that's not a valid criticism and that spreads misinformation. Let's not do that.
No. And also, yeah, see, Chuck is the reason why I worry about opining about geopolitics. Because when you are that poorly informed, you're just going to do more harm than good, even if what you're having to say is true. And we're not going to find out, because Chuck cared more about being derisive, about name calling, and about making himself sound like he was very big and important than he did about being convincing. And you could tell that because those are the things that he focused on. And so that's his prerogative. So I do want to, Dhruv in India called back, and we are over time. And so I do want to have Dhruv on for a minute, though. Dhruv, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
I hate.
I'm sorry, the call was disconnected.
No. I hate that there's not enough time to really hear you out, because you had a multi-part set of questions and comments that I think are really, really. You disconnected again.
Oh no.
Oh, Dhruv, my heart. Okay, I hope you're watching though, and I want you to call back. I want to figure out how we can get you a solid connection, so that we can have that conversation, because that's incredibly important, and I would love to see that. That said, I think it's time to read some super chats. It looks like we got one today. That's good. Janice in Oregon sent $30 and said, "Thank you for promoting reason and compassionate conversations, including about hard and demonetizing topics." Thank you. Every little bit goes to help. I would love to see the show continue. And if you want to support it, consider going to patreon.com/skepticgeneration. That's patreon.com/skepticgeneration. Drew, that was a quick 2 hours. What'd you think?
I will say, I was accurate in my prediction that I would miss Ted. I did miss Ted.
Drew, I think that when it comes to, getting back to the topic of today's episode, right? Challenging authority. I think we saw quite a few different versions of that, good and bad.
No, we really, really did. And I actually think that, it's not just because of the way that Ted came at us in this very, very calm and sympathetic way. It wasn't just Ted's tone, but also just his question, like he talked about, he gave specifics so that we could get into specifics in return. And there are more productive ways to talk about and challenge authority than others.
Agreed. And I deeply appreciate the way that you've been doing it. You said that, this is what you're using your platform for, but you failed to mention that you've also used your platform in the past to highlight what cults actually are. Getting information about the bite model, talking about how, Young Living and other organizations like that are preying upon people, and how not just atheists but Christians are victims of these kinds of tactics. I love that the approach that you take is well reasoned, well researched, and often a really good resource. It's not just finding people who agree with you and going, yeah, say it, say the thing. You actually give people the tools to be able to learn for themselves when it comes to those topics. And for that, I so appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it is the goal to get people interested in the topic and learning about the topic from reputable sources beyond my channel. There's only so much good that I can do in even an hour-long video. It'd be much better, honestly, if people went and read books about this subject. But I understand, as a YouTube enjoyer, that you're not always wanting to, you don't always want to mainline I don't know, highly dense informational content into your brain at all times. And sometimes you want to just see somebody that, you like and relate with, talk about it a little bit more casually. So I'm happy to provide that. I hope that, people do go and read the primary sources that I use and get more educated on this stuff. I've actually seen some people do that and challenge me and my conclusions that I've drawn in videos afterward. And I would really, really rather see that than someone go, oh yeah, occasionally I'll get the comment that says Drew's a great scholar. And I'm like, no, I am not. I don't have the authority for that. I don't have the education for that. I'd rather see someone challenge my authority in a constructive way, based on their own, continuing education, than someone to praise me for being smart.
Yeah. It's easy. It's easy to scroll past all the kind comments. But you do deserve them too.
Appreciate that. Eric has told me this many times, audience, behind the scenes. This has been one of Eric's main pieces of advice to me, is to not scroll past the nice comments.
Damn straight. We did have one more super chat that I just wanted to say. Jen Graham sent £2 and says, that Magna Carta claim was painful as a Brit. Drew, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I'd love to have you on again. It's so much fun just hanging out with you and taking calls. Is there anything else that you want to plug before we wrap up?
I'm about to put out a video that I haven't 100% decided on the title yet, but the video will basically be why the atheist to anti-woke right pipeline exists and makes sense, even though atheists are disproportionately very much on the left. So yeah, I will be talking about why atheists fall down the anti-woke pipeline, and why that is not actually that unusual if you understand the atheist community's culture.
I'm excited about it. Cool. Alt-right pipeline. Okay, cool. Thank you so much again for joining. So let's try the sign off. I'm Eric Murphy.
I'm Drew.
And we're glad we had this talk.